You have found what lights you up. I'm your host, Sunny the Life Coach, and I'm here because I see you searching for something or someone out there to help you feel better. Something to take away the pain that you're feeling, the inadequacies. I know all of the things that happen in life can leave you feeling empty. Your search is over. This podcast is all about finding your own freedom and power to love yourself enough to shine in the ways you were always meant to, the ways in which you are already fully capable of. If you're ready for some real talk, some serious truth bombs, and a few F-bombs, you are in the right place. Let's do this. Let's get lit. Hey there, and welcome to the officially official 100th episode of What Lights You Up. Oh my God. On one hand, I feel like I should be celebrating with confetti and balloons. And on the other hand, I feel like an exhausted mom who just wants to send her kid off to a full day of school already. I don't know, but either way, we've just hit a milestone here with this episode, and I'm kind of feeling like I should make it something special, like a milestone birthday or something. Now, the truth is, and I told you about this a few episodes back, this is technically episode 106 or somewhere along those lines, because what happened when I first started this podcast is that I somehow got the idea that I could only put numbers on my episodes each week. If I happened to release something in between, I would call it a bonus, and it didn't get a number. No freaking idea where I got this notion, by the way. Just something that I decided early on, and then I just kind of kept it going. That's what we do. And let's just take a moment to recognize that this podcast started in April of 2020. So, let's take a moment to acknowledge that a lot of shit started happening in rapid succession. I literally didn't feel like I could wait a full week for some of the topics that were just bursting inside of me to come out. There is that. That is part of what happened. And when I started hitting the 50s in terms of the number of episodes, that's when I realized that I probably should just number them all instead of leaving those bonuses without numbers. But at that point, I was too deep into whatever the structure was that I myself had created. So I decided to keep writing it out until I hit 100. Either way, here we are. 100. 100 officially official. Writing it out also meant that no one would have to comb the transcripts and find every reference to every previous episode number I might have dropped along the way as well. Because let me tell you about a pet peeve of mine. Let's do that, because I'm going to talk a bit more about myself today. I think we're due for a little bit more opening up in some areas. Let's get that out of the way first. Let's get this out of the way first. One pet peeve is when I am listening to a podcast that directs me to a previous episode. For example, let's say, quote, unquote, I talked about this back on episode 43 if you would like to revisit. And then that's not even the number or even close to it. And I'm lost because I really did miss episode 43 originally, or I would like to refresh myself if I am listening to a podcaster who is in the 300s, for example. Another thing that I personally find super annoying is check show notes and the shit isn't there. You all, please, if I ever do that, please, please, please tell me if I ever do that. Either it's a reference to an article or something relevant. A lot of times I will be walking or driving when I am listening, and I do not have a chance to follow a link until later when I remember to do that. Then the link isn't there. Just FYI, 2 things that bother an avid follower of many podcasts, as long as you hold my attention. And that's the thing too. I didn't even know what a podcast was or why anyone would want to listen to a podcast. Just a few years ago, I can certainly acknowledge that I never considered that I would one day have a space out here to share my own voice and my own experiences, my own perceptions of this freaking amazing life. I just want to take a moment to breathe that in and sit with it with you. I want to extend my deepest gratitude that you have joined me for this one. Whenever or wherever you may be, we are officially in the triple digits. And I have learned so many things about myself and about other humans in going on this journey. Thank you for walking alongside me. All of that said, I was left with sitting on the notion of what amazing topic could I bring for the officially official 100th episode? I think it's going to be a mashup of things that have been floating around in my brain for a while. Hang in there with me. This could be a fun ride. First of all, I want to acknowledge the title of this episode was inspired by a new friend of mine. I have lots of new friends. That is so fun. New, amazing, multi-dimensional, and real to the core. I think the older we get, the easier it is to spot them out in the wild, isn't it? But this one, the one that inspired this title, this friend, I met her through my local Buy Nothing group. B-U-Y Nothing. Buy Nothing group. When I was ready to gift our son's train set for Christmas, I go through these periodic bouts of purging items from my home. I just look up and say, yeah, don't need this anymore. I post it in Buy Nothing as kind of like free to a good home. I choose the recipient. I put it out on my porch and the things just magically disappear. I love it so much. If you no longer want something, someone else does. And you don't have to devote your entire weekend to a garage sale. I'm just not doing it. Both my husband and I agree that it's far more valuable for us to donate the stuff than it is to donate our time to an event such as a garage sale. That is not to say we wouldn't donate our time to another cause that is far more worthy than us, if you will, selling our junk. Anyway, I've been part of these local Buy Nothing groups for years. I have parted with a lot of things along the way, but never have I had the response that I received from my new friend when I chose her to receive the train set of our son. She had replied that Her family had recently moved here from Canada, and her children's grandfather is a train conductor, a Canadian train conductor. So that would make their first Christmas here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area super special. Not gonna say no to that. But that is not the response I am talking about. The response I'm talking about came when I was messaging her for pickup arrangements. Because when you are gifting your things, the beautiful part about it is, again, just setting the things outside and allowing them to disappear. Sometimes you get a sweet smile and a wave on your Ring camera, which is fantastic. This one, though, she said, I'll come by around 7:30. Can I bring you a coffee? And you all, I was like, what do I do with this request? I don't even drink coffee anymore, but suddenly, just the idea of having a hot coffee delivered to my door was something I couldn't even conceive of turning away. And that's how I met my new friend. She was picking up the bag full of an amazing train set to put around her Christmas tree for her children while handing me a coffee with the biggest smile, like we were sharing a secret. It was magic. It turns out that she is also a healer. She does reflexology, tarot, all kinds of other fun things. The other thing that she has is a Facebook group called This Life Turns Me On. And as soon as I got that invite, I saw her face in my mind. And I knew I was going to have to talk about it. Not about the concept of the group, mind you. That is private. I knew I was going to have to talk about the concept that this life turns me on. Even the most awful parts of this life. Which is why I am so very unwilling to ditch those awful parts in favor of the happy, shiny parts. It's why I am unwilling to completely shed everything that has ever felt horrible and lurked in the shadows, because eventually your mess becomes your message. Eventually you will be able to see that this life actually turns you on. I don't intend this in a sexual way either, but if it floats your boat to go there with this phrase, be my guest. Nothing wrong with that. If you aren't trying to numb it or hide it to fix it or fade it, you can be completely tuned in and turned on by this life if you are willing to see it. I will give you an example that shocked me. A little hit that I got while I was driving around doing errands earlier today. I had this recollection of the time that my ex decided to use my head as a punching bag. I think he was mad at me for hanging outside at a party with some male friends of mine. I don't even recall what set him off. That is not relevant because we are not going to condone or even excuse this behavior. That's not what it is about. It's about the utter shock that I felt in the moment that I saw stars. He was driving. He was driving my vehicle, by the way, because I was a little too inebriated to drive myself. He was actually sober. Man, was he pissed. I didn't see it coming. I just saw stars. And I heard the ringing in my ears, and I felt the complete disconnect from my body. Everything was spinning. I was so confused for the first few seconds. Like, what is even happening? Well, that happened. Something I have never talked about for a whole lot of reasons, not the least of which was that I stayed with him for a couple of years after that. In fact, I begged him to stay with me. I apologized for whatever it was that I did that made him angry. Because that's what good girls do, don't they? They smooth things over. They try to tame those who are spinning out. We might even try to save them. So it wasn't just that the event itself shocked me in the moment. It's that the event itself came back so vividly. Well, over 20 years later, as I'm driving along headed to the library, just a random errand that had nothing to do with the time or the place I was in back then. That's when I could hear my friend Lisa, who recently came on this podcast. I heard Lisa in my head explaining that trauma lives in your body and recovery looks different for each of us. And that is where the gratitude came in. Of course, I don't feel gratitude for having been physically assaulted by someone that I loved. That's not the gratitude I'm talking about. We're knowing that experience in itself was not the defining moment. The true defining moment was having a recall decades later and being okay with it. Yep. That happened. And also, you are safe. You are loved. You are honored. You are precious. That's not something that your beautiful self might come up with in the heat of the moment. If that moment is something awful, to tell you that you are safe, you are honored, you are loved, you are precious. We look to everyone else around us to demonstrate that. We look for evidence from them that those words are true. When we find the opposite, we start to believe the opposite is true. In fact, we may live an entire lifetime believing that bullshit. That is why the seed that my new friend planted for me in using such language as "this life turns me on" is so very meaningful, because I am totally and completely turned on by the idea of feeling anything at all. That's another thing that might happen along our path of living this life, is it not? We might just decide that the best thing to feel is absolutely nothing at all. This can become an entire episode around numbing the pain, and that's not exactly what I'm after today, so I simply want to acknowledge that. When we typically think of a turned on life, we think tuned in and charged the fuck up. We think about sexually charged, which is amazing. It is amazing to feel all of those feelings in your body. It truly is. The problem is that our emotions are directly tied to the feelings in our bodies. And as I keep reminding you all that Goddess Brene Brown told us many years ago in her infamous TED Talk, you cannot selectively numb. You can't say, I want to feel this, just not that. It's an all or nothing deal. This numbing concept, this escape. If you try to run away from the hardest parts of you, the hardest edges, you could also squash the most beautiful parts of your life experience in the process. This is so hugely important, and we don't give nearly enough airtime to it. Just as humans in general, we do not normalize talking openly about your emotions. My God, they are the very best parts of us. They aren't something to push away or hide from everyone else, including yourself. In fact, the more you run from it, the more opportunities the universe is going to give you to experience it anyway. It's like, dummy, you tried to skip class and not learn this lesson? Let me serve it up to you again and again and again until you see what is actually happening inside of you. Like rejection. That's the emotion that is the most painful for me personally. And everything is fine. It's all good and life is wonderful as long as everyone else behaves the way I want them to. And they only treat me with kindness and respect. Yeah, how do you think that's been going for me? I am eventually forced to sit with my feelings and take a hard look at what I have been doing to attract this very emotion my way. I'm the one doing this. I am ultimately in control. So, what does my higher self want to see? That is what I have to ask myself, and I don't always get to do it right away. I am just as good at avoiding as any one of you listening today. I'm a freaking master at it. If I am being honest, I am a master of avoidance. Do you see what I'm getting at here? How cool is that? Man, this life turns me on. I wanted to mention the bit about the ex in that moment in time because it came to me for a reason. It isn't something that I revisit or relive or even anything that I have thought about for a very long time, but it came up in my memory bank and I took that as a reflection. Let's talk about the difference between reflecting, revisiting, and reliving for just a moment, because we tend to relive and sometimes dwell on the awful parts of life. Those parts are dramatic, not traumatic, though it may well have been, but dramatic drama. Our brains love a good drama when they replay the movie of our lives, don't they? They sure do. That's why when we have a fresh hell of an experience, our brains will replay it over and over so we can relive it. Fun times, right? And over time, the freshness wears off and we move on, but we haven't really done much with that moment in time beyond rewatching it in our minds. And so it just gets filed away until something random triggers us and we end up losing our shit. Usually, this outburst happens with another person who is completely unrelated to your original fresh hell experience because, well, that just makes our relationships that much more interesting. Now, doesn't it? It's wild. Such a turn on. Eventually, we are doing the work and actually processing the feelings that come along with our fresh hell experiences. I am truly digging this term. I think I'm going to use it with all of my clients. Eventually, we come to awareness that everything that has happened has been valuable in some way. Let's take just a handful of what I would previously have referred to as downright awful events and reflect on the personal growth that came from them. That's how I view things now. We are not going to be able to completely get away from our memories. I don't believe that. Not unless we are diagnosed with dementia or some other affliction that erases our memories, which by all accounts is a terrible thing to happen. I view looking back as there can be so many levels of nuance to that practice. Sometimes it really is wallowing. When you relive it, and you might even feel the feelings that you have been repressing, which might very well be necessary for healing, that is not wallowing. That is processing. And sometimes we are personally called to process something that we avoided a long ass time ago. Ask me how. I know. This isn't up to anyone else to decide how you process your fresh hell experiences, even if they aren't so fresh anymore. Your therapist, your coach, your spirit guides invite those entities to support you on your journey, but don't expect your neighbor or your casual friends to get on board with understanding. They might tell you to move on and stop wallowing. In fact, it's highly likely that they will. Okay, back to that handful of downright awful events and what it means to reflect on the personal growth that came from them. There's the assault. That I swept under the rug and denied even to myself that it even happened until I eventually exploded and I left that relationship in a way that was so very hard on both of us. Again, not condoning what he did, but I'm also not going to carry anger over it anymore. Not over that or over any of the times that he blamed my infertility for us not being able to start a family. To be honest, that was far harder on me because the physical hits were a quick moment in time, but the emotional turmoil surrounding my infertility truly was death by 1,000 cuts over several years. There was also my teenage suicide attempt, being homeless and broke, my near-death experience from a ruptured tubal pregnancy. The suicide attempt, of course, showed me that I truly wanted to live. It just took me a few more decades to figure out how I wanted that living to look, how I wanted to do more than exist. What a gift. Still, as a teenager, I had to work multiple jobs while in high school just to help pay the bills. My dad was able to get us an apartment eventually, and that's it. Mattresses on the floor and cardboard boxes for end tables. But before that, we would rotate sleeping on friends' couches or in borrowed cars. I know what it means to be homeless. We didn't even have our own car at the time. And I was fine with working to help pay utilities and groceries when I was 16, 17 years old. As the result of those experiences, I cannot bring myself to look down on any low-wage job or service worker. I appreciate what they go through just to get by. Always have, always will. I leave tips above and beyond the recommended percentage. I see them, I interact with them, and we have taught our son to do the same. Seriously, when he was like 5 or 6 years old, we refused to order his meals for him. He could read well enough by that point, and he was told to speak clearly, to look his server in the eye, and to tell him or her exactly what he wants. And I'm not patting myself on the back for this. I'm simply saying that, having walked a couple of miles in those shoes, just a couple of miles, I am all about acknowledging those who serve in other ways than military. Well, not at all knocking military service. That is simply my takeaway from having had the experience of needing to contribute to the household bills at an early age. I know that still happens. I know that there are a lot of kids out there who are scrappy and will do whatever it takes to keep their four walls and cardboard boxes. I see you. Okay, we have covered failed suicide, homeless and broke. Now let's tackle that whole near-death experience. I've talked about this before, and it's really about what you're left with, in my opinion. That's what I have come to understand. It's not about what other humans are able to do to pull off. Great, fantastic, good for you. And very much great, fantastic, good for you when you are witnessing a birth mother do those things. What a gift. A gift I would never have had if it weren't for my own infertility. I could have had the most wonderful pictures of the birthing process, or I could walk away with no pictures at all. No birth announcement, no baby shower, none of the traditional things. I could walk away with none of that, yet also walk away with a deep knowing that only those who have lived this experience will ever understand. This is rich, this is deep, this is perfect in so many ways, which brings me full circle, honestly, to how this whole thing started. Not just this podcast, but this life. I am only here because I have parents who were so damn determined not to follow the script. Yet they were bound and determined to do everything their way. And so I was born in nature under a crescent moon. Yeah, I've looked it up with by only a couple of kids in their early 20s who didn't have a clue what they were doing, but they figured it out, and I am here. I have lived through a lot, as have you. See that, okay? Truly see that. It was, and I talked about this on my very first episode. My birth was kind of a label of shame, simply because no one was born in the woods. No one was not born in a hospital. I was other, I was weird, I was shunned. The minute I admitted that part of me existed, the other kids looked at me like I was an alien, and so I never spoke of it again. It took a very long time for me to be able to come to terms with the way that I was born and to stop apologizing for it. I look at it now and I'm in complete and total awe. It's perfect. It is exactly the way I wanted to come here. If I had been given the choice, and perhaps I was, who knows, I wouldn't have chosen anything differently. I was meant to have the parents and grandparents that I had. I was meant to have the siblings and the friends that I have. I was meant to have the adoption experience with our son that we have. It is the most amazing thing ever. This journey has been and continues to be amazing. This life truly turns me on. As Rumi says, the moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open. And I think that it is also on the heels of another Rumi quote, and in honor of the 100th episode of this amazing podcast, my podcast baby. Let's talk about Oriah Mountain Dreamer, and let's just read her poem called The Invitation, because it is so very meaningful and powerful for me, even to this day. So the invitation goes like this. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for. And if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing, it doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring with your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful. Be realistic. Remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if this story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul, if you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not pretty every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure. Yours or mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes, it doesn't interest me. To know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me to know. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else fades away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. The Invitation by Araya Mountain Dreamer, my friends. I don't think that I can wrap this episode up any greater than having read that amazing, amazing poem again. I mean, oh, such a beautiful thing. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on my officially official 100th episode. Yeah, we're just going to continue on from this point forward. 100 weeks straight. We're going to mark this. We're going to put the stake in the ground. It has been 100 weeks straight of this podcast. And, from here on, we are just going to continue numbering whenever the mood strikes. I'm going to number it and we're going to put it out there. And I mean, it just deserves all of the love. Please tell your friends about it. I love you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much. And if you would like to connect with me, please email me at sunnythelifecoach@gmail.com. Love you. Bye-bye.